Peace, Miss Elena. Peace, Shema. Peace, Willie. What's going on, man? Peace, Miss Elena. Peace, Shema. How my sound is? My sound good out there? I want to make sure I'm sounding crispy and it's not sounding distorted. If the sound good, let me know if the sound good. Peace, Nagozil. Peace. Hotel Center in Monaco. So that means ETM Hotel Center in Monaco. So my sound good? I think Miss Ellen said it's okay. It's good. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm good and crisp. All right. Yeah. All right. I'ma play some little music real quick, but I sent some invites out to in a few groups. So give me just a second and I'm gonna get started. So just check out the music till I get started. I'll get started in about 5 minutes. Just let me invite a few more people. Peace, Tasha. All right, we can go and get started. I just wanted to play some music while I was trying to.
Chris McDaniel loves the spotlight, but doesn't care much for President Trump.
Trying to share it in a few groups real quick. Hotel, seeing Sean. Hotel, Saber Wujao. Peace, Kendall, Anderson. Hotel, seeing Les. But let me go on and get started real quick.
Man in the full knowledge of himself is a superb and supreme picture of creation. When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment, the captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own ends. Man should understand himself because man is full of knowledge, and this knowledge is a gift of nature. When Mother Nature created man, she deprived him of nothing. He was given the faculty of understanding all things around him. This faculty for understanding has not been taken away from him. None of his senses have been taken away from him. So there is no excuse for the black man.
Raising my team, red, black, and green, queen, the king, salute, now scream, I should bring forth another hit. I should fight for different. I'm raising my team, red, black, and green, queen, the king, salute, now scream, I should bring forth another hit. I should fight for different. I should.
All right. Today's presentation is called African Fabrics and Weaving / Technology Presentation Part 1. This is Part 1 of 2 presentations. Part 2 I will be doing tomorrow on my YouTube channel, Kofi Paisar TV. So if you hadn't subscribed, please go subscribe and hit the bell. But the presentation Part 2 was going to be the presentation I was going to present. But I had to present this information before I present the information on the information for Part 2 tomorrow. So again, this is African Fabrics and Weaving / Technology Presentation Part 1. Peace, Brother Jadara. Peace, James. Peace, and Brother Yehuda. I spoke to everybody else. All right, this is my disclaimer. I always have to give a disclaimer before I get started. And let me bag up too before I even get started. I want to say ETM Hotel. I want to say Dua Duau. I want to say Dua Netcha. Hekanu in Amindra Bakwa Kwa Isekam. Modupe. Fakmu Iwapele. Fakmu Alafie. Igun Mojube Ibai Igungun Kiki Igungun. So I just want to always do this special. I always want to give honor and praises to the ancestors with everything that I do. So let's get into it. The disclaimer is I am not a teacher, but merely a student sharing information. And that information provided is for educational purpose only. And if you are in doubt, do the research and have it verified by someone qualified. I reserve the right to change the focus of this presentation to shut down, sell, or exchange the terms of use at my own discretion. All trademark, design rights, copyrights, registered names, mottos, logos, avatars, or signals, and marks used or cited by this website or property of their prospective owners. I reserve the right to add information as it comes available or adapt changes, improve information as it comes available in the future. Inputs wanted. Let me say that again. Inputs wanted, changes, additions, deletions, or encouraged. So I always have to give a disclaimer before I get started. That's why at the end I always say, me improving my information, because I know information changes over time due to different findings and certain things, information that may comes available that I may not have in the future. I don't mind going back and changes. Inputs and changes, additions, deletions, meaning that if I have something wrong or inaccurate, I don't mind you correcting me. I will not get in my emotions. I will correct it and learn from this and make the corrections as needed. Deletions are encouraged. Please share the video too, family. As this is my saying that I love to say, as I learn, we all learn. So this is a motto that I live by. That's why I say I am not a teacher, but merely a student sharing information. I love to share information. Hotep Jehuti, Brother Jehuti, peace, Danal, Rock and Roller Jenkins. But I just love to share information. So I feel like if we all grasp this, and as we learn things, we should share it with others. I think this is the only way we'll be able to grow. This is the only way we'll be able to succeed. This is the only way that we'll be able to be successful as we learn things, no matter what it is, whether it's big or small, learning and passing it on to the family. Peace, John. All right. Before I get started, I'm gonna I took a clip from a presentation that the Amun-Ra squad did Brother Uncle Kit, Brother Wu Jiao, I think Brother Ben was on there, and I think Brother Nahisi was on there. So I took, and this was the other day. If you hadn't looked at it, go back and look at it. I think this was Sunday. I think it said Quick Bill is the title of it, but they went into a lot of different two different topics. So I just wanted to I took a piece of this because it kind of goes with what I'm gonna be talking about.
Humans didn't have clothes, and it was the technology of clothes that allowed us to even leave Africa. Humans didn't have clothes, and it was the technology of clothes that allowed us to even leave Africa. Humans didn't have clothes, and it was the technology of clothes that allowed us to even leave Africa. Humans didn't have clothes, and it was the technology of clothes that allowed us to even leave Africa.
Yeah, I wanted him to keep repeating it. So let's get into it. This is part 1 of this presentation, and this presentation is to show the creation of weaving fabrics of clothes, which is technology, and the technology to create the fabric / textile, such as looms, spindles, dye, and needles. This presentation is in North Africa, Kemet, and part 2 will be in West Africa. So I started in West Africa with the presentation, but in order for me, I didn't want to present that presentation, so I went back and started another presentation, which will be specifically in North Africa, dealing with Kemet, dealing with the Bremich of the Kemetu, and then part 2 will be dealing with West Africa, the Bride of West Africa. So let's get into it. All right, Neat. For those that might not know who Neat is, peace, George Garrett, and peace, Senate Lisa, and the brother I don't know. I don't even want to pronounce his name wrong. Falima is the last name, but peace to you. So Neat was an ancient goddess of war and weaving. She was a patron goddess of the Red Crown of Lower Egypt in the city of Zos, in the 5th nome of Lower Egypt, in the Delta. According to Uinti Esna cosmology, and a lot of these things dealing with the cosmology, if you want to know more about the cosmology in Kemet, you can go to Kofi Paisai TV. That's my YouTube channel. Me and brother Asar M. Akar broke down the 4 cosmologies in Kemet. We did a thorough breakdown of cosmology. So if you want to learn more about the different cosmologies, go to my channel. Neat was a creator of the world and the mother of the sun, Ra. This made her the mother of all the gods and connected her with Nun, a member of the Ogdog of Hermopolis, who with the personification of the premier waters. And by the way, when we break down, we don't give these Greek names when you hear Ogdog and Hermopolis and goddess and so forth, but we give the proper names there. It was personification of the premier waters of the chaos from which Ra emerged at the beginning of time. However, she was also credited with creating Apep, the great serpent and the swarm enemy of Ra, by spitting out the waters of Nun. This is one of the cosmologies. She was also with 2 different emblems, the shield crossed with the 2 arrows, or the weaving shuttles. This is her. This is a relief, the relief out of the tomb of Ka'um Waset in the Valley of the Kings. Hotep, I am my brother's keeper. She was associated with the 2 different emblems, the shield cross, the 2 arrows, and the weaving shuttles. It seems that cross arrows was her symbols during the pre-dynastic period, when she was considered to be the goddess of hunting and the war, known by the epithet mistress of the bow, or ruler of the arrow. The cross arrow also formed the emblem of the town Zos, and the name of the nome, which is her city, was the capital. This early record example of Neith being written used by the cross arrows is the name of the queen Nehotep, thought to be the wife of Hor, earlier dynastic period. It is not clear when the arrows were replaced by the weaving shuttles, or whether this was the result of confusion or an attempt to realign Neith as a goddess of weaving. One creation myth suggests that she created the world by weaving, and it will sometimes suggest that she was connected to funeral rites because she was responsible for weaving by mummy wrappings. Hotep, Satep and Ra, peace, Orlando Branch. So I wanted to start off with Neith because in one of the cosmology, she is considered the nature of creation. She is associated with Noon. And again, for those that want to know more about those cosmologies, you can go to my channel, Kofi Paisa TV, and me and Asai M. Carr breaks down the 4 cosmologies and Kemet. But she is the nature, is one of the cosmologies surrounding her, is she is the nature of weaving. And this presentation is going to be dealing with weaving, dealing with fabrics, dealing with the loom, the spindles, the needles, and so forth. All right. This here on this side is an ancient Egyptian cloth harvest scene from the tombs of Pesara's Tuna El Gabel, Egypt, photo by Ron Urgip. So I'm going to try to show as much pictures as possible dealing with the primaries to kind of back up some of the things that I'm saying. African textiles are a part of the culture heritage of its people. The ancient Egyptians, or the Remich, are known to use looms as early as 4000 BC, or wore linen clothing made with fibers from the flax plants which were beaten. First, the men and sometimes women would pick the fibers from the flax plants. These fibers would come in the forms of strips and would go on to make the threads for that was spun. So the Remich or the Kemetu, they planted this seed called, they planted a plant called the flax plant, and they would plant this flax seed during the springtime, and they would pick it during the summertime. They would harvest it in the spring, and then they would pick this in the summertime. And then what they would do will, they would get the fiber from the plant. They would cut, as they say, they would cut the plant, at the bottom, what I'm saying, and strip it up into different strips. And we're going to get into what they do after they cut the plant and strip it up into different strips. It was good to go on to make the threads that was spun. The threads' finest dependence on the age of plant, the younger and finer. Now the men part is over, and the rest of the entire process was done by the women. Ancient Egyptian women of the Remich would usually make a clothing at home through their, though there were also garments making shops which enlisted the help of the women to make clothing and sell. So the women would make the clothing at home, and they also had clothing shops. We'll get into that as well. They had shops where you had these weavers that would go in and make the fabric for the clothing. And this is ancient times. All right, flax. So I talked about flax. So let's get into a little bit about flax, the flax seeds. This was the fabric. This was the yarn that they actually used in order to create the fabric or the clothing. Flax has to be used in Middle East since the 5th millennium BCE. In Egypt, its role was probably more important than many other cultures. And Egyptians rarely used wool and cotton. They didn't start using cotton until the Romans came into Egypt around I think 30 BC, if I'm not mistaken. But they started using cotton. They started getting cotton from India being imported into that region. Cotton was also known during much of the ancient history. It was seen as a gift of the Nile, and the hymn of Happy has it. People are clothed with the flax of his field. Doing the old, and if you understand the hymns of Happy, we're talking about the happy Aris, or the happy river that we call the Nile, or we're talking about the nature Happy. During the Old Kingdom, an official called Majatan had his career written down. being an overseer of all flax was not at least as many honors bestowed upon him. So it was an honor for those who was an overseer of picking the flax. And this here is an image of the flax plants on this side here. The plant takes about 100 days to grow from seed to mature plants with a height of between 60 centimeters to metrics. The flax harvest precedes the wheat harvest. The flax plants were gathered in whole when they were in bloom. Its better fiber could be produced from young plants. The Egyptians or the Remich or the Kemetus were well aware of this fact, is attested to in the documents. Flax fibers are among the longest and strongest of all natural fibers used by man. They even gain the strength when wet due to the high percent contents, which acts like a glue under moist conditions. They dry quickly and resist decays better than most other natural fibers. So the flax plant was created the fiber. The spinning, the linen. The results of yellowish or grayish fibers were in the form of flax, 60 to 80 centimeters long strips, each consisting of 20 to 40 single fibers. These strips were then divided into strands and required thickness. Until the late period, many pairs of strips were sliced together ends, and the ends were twisted into wools. So this here is where they're talking about, where I talked about where they went in, plucked the flax seeds, and then began to split the flax seeds in half and started splitting them together in order to make yarn. So this is the concept of where yarn come from. Hotep saying Amin Ma'at Ra, a yarn come from. These strips were then divided into strands of a required thickness. Until late period, many of the pairs of strips were spliced together ends to end and twisted into rolls, which was the spun into thread. Egyptians or the Remich or the Kemetu spinners often used two spindles, stimulus, with balls of flax wools lying on the ground or in low containers, which served as a sort of distaff. Sometimes the spitter stood on the footstools in order to have the greatest distance possible between the spindle and the flax. In later parts of the first millennium BCE, the splice and the twist techniques was abandoned in favor of draft spinning, where the fibers are drawn from loose mass raw materials gathered distaffs. In the seshmet netter, there's flax grain. Okay, appreciate that, Sin. This is red, I mean. Okay. Woven linen, we're talking about weaving. Weaving linen has been known in Egypt, Kemet, since 5000 BCE. The oldest depiction of a loom was founded in Badara, which Badara is in the region of Upper Egypt. We know Badara is known before the pre-dynastic of the agriculture area, the pre-dynastic period, Badara. On the pottery dish dating from the middle of the 15th millennium BCE, while the first known picture of weavers were drawn during the Middle Kingdom. And here is a picture here on the side here. You can see the women, you can see the loom. Now, I'm going to be talking about the vertical loom and the horizontal loom. So this is the technology in order for our ancestors to create the technology called clothing for us to wear. And on this picture here, and brother was Sibyl Wujal and Sinet Imiket talked about the imagery and the pictures and so forth dealing with the Kemet imagery. Now on here, you can see this here is a vertical of this. This looks like a vertical loom here where they finna start weaving the fiber to make material or clothing and so forth. But in this depiction, it is not a horizontal. In the Old Kingdom, I'll talk about the horizontal loom, which was the technology that our ancestors created in order to weave and create clothing and different sorts of fabrics. But you have the horizontal loom and you have the vertical loom. Now this would be the horizontal loom, even though it looks vertical. Now, when the Remich created their paintings and engraved on things and painted on the walls and so forth, in the depictions, if they wanted to look behind, this is why it looks like the loom is vertical when it's horizontal. The scribes made it this way in order for you to look behind. So it is actually, the loom is actually horizontal. I hope I'm explaining this. I know Sybil Wujao could explain this a little bit better than how I'm explaining it. But it is horizontal and not vertical. Even though in the New Kingdom we're going to talk about the vertical, and I'm going to show a reduplication of the looms, the horizontal looms. But in the Old Kingdom, they only deal with the with the horizontal loom and not the vertical loom. But it is a horizontal loom, but due to the depiction of the scribes wanted to show the depictions of the weavers with people behind the weavers, they painted it in this form. Hotep Ampu Ma'at Ra. The looms was horizontal with the wooding supporting with the warp beams and the cloth being that could be rotated, and which ends of the warp threaded were tied into which were woven cloths was wound. The wraps yarns were lifted with 2 little sticks, least rods, in order to pull through the weft with the help of the shutters, which according to as a depiction was already known in the Old Kingdom. The weft was beaten with a bent stick. 2 women generally working in the looms. You can see the 2 women you will necessarily see in the images, and some of the other images that I show. You're going to see mostly the 2 women built down with the horizontal loom weaving fabric. The women generally working in the loom earlier times, crouching as the looms were very low. But sometimes looms were made for 3 or even 4 weavers. When the Egyptian or the Remich or the Kemetu wanted to show things, okay, and I put it in here. When the Remich wanted to show things which were behind each other on a horizontal plane, they drew them above each other. Thus, the loom in this picture may look as if it were vertical, when in reality it is horizontal. So this, I did put it in here. So again, when the scribes painted or engraved certain things and they wanted to show the depiction behind, the people will be the depiction will look like it's horizontal when it's vertical. All right. Now I explained the looms. Now this is technology. I'm doing this in all to aspect review. That's what it was. Yes, that's what it was. And I know Seba Wujao could talk about this a little bit more. So now I talked about when the vertical loom. So now let's get into the horizontal loom, because I'm tying this technology in that our ancestors did in order for us to create clothing. Because without our ancestors creating the spindle, without our ancestors creating the needle, without our ancestors creating the loom, without our ancestors taking the flax and creating this fabric called linen that a lot of us have in our homes, this linen fabric in order to create clothing and other different types of fabric. They created these weaving techniques and this technology in order to build them. Clothing is technology. These things that they created to create these fabrics is technology. Vertical looms with a heavy wooden frames came into use during the New Kingdom, and movable poles supported the warp beams. The least rods lifting the warp yarns were worked with the help of the lever. Peace, brother Leo. Least lifting the warp yarns were worked with the helps of the levers. The wefts were beating with a sleigh, which later replaced by a comb. The cloth of the breath beams was at the foot of the loom. The weavers sat in front of the little stools. See the weavers working on the ground floor of the house of the jet. Now, on the vertical loom that I showed a while ago, or the depiction on the wall, you could see actually the weavers, the women with the vertical loom built down where they start to weave fabrics. Now, that was the horizontal loom. This here would be the vertical loom, and I couldn't find a depiction on the wall of the vertical loom. I can only find was reduplications of the horizontal of the horizontal loom. But we know the horizontal looms was made during the New Kingdom, and it was made up under the Jehuti Nefer, so I only found the reduplications here. But most of the other people, I'm going to show you the primaries and not the reduplications that I have here on the side. But you can see, let me go back. You can see the loom. So this is the vertical loom. So you had the old kingdom, you had the horizontal looms, and in the new kingdom, you had the vertical looms that the weavers would use to weave. All right. Upright vertical looms from the tomb of Jehuti Nefer of Thebes, and I tried to find it. And you can see where Mr. N.D. Jeb Davis tried to reduplicate it, and you can see most of the times, like even if you go back to some of the videos that we did to Seshu, one of the videos you can see where we had a reduplication, and you see where the reduplication was damaged due to whatever they took the picture of on the primary. It was damaged also. Now I wanted to show you, now this is what actually a vertical loom will look like now. So the invention or the technology that our ancestors created in North Africa to start weaving fabric was the vertical loom. So this, so I just wanted to show what it would kind of look like that we're still utilizing to the day, this loom to weave fabric. So this would be the vertical loom here, and I mean the horizontal loom, and this would be the vertical loom. So I'm just showing you just a modern day depiction of what these looms will look like that our ancestors created thousands of years ago. So they are the inventors of weaving and so forth. So just wanted to show this picture. All right. Now here on this side is a picture. This is a wooden model of a weaver shop from the tomb of Menket Ra. So in earlier times, I showed you in Badara. Badara was in Upper Kemet. This was the pre-dynastic period where on the pottery of the Badara pottery, where you could show weaving taking place. Then I showed you going into the old kingdom, the horizontal weaving, the pictures on the wall, which I'm going to continue to show pictures that's in Egypt, kind of continue to show the primaries. Now this is a model here that was in Menket Ra tomb, which is in the Cairo Museum in Egypt now. So this here is a picture, and I'm gonna show you like a lot of things. I'm gonna show you some other things in Menket Ra tomb and why he made these models of certain things that he had and so forth. But here you can see the vertical loom, because again we're talking about this actually is the middle kingdom. So from the old kingdom to the middle kingdom, the looms that create the fabric for the clothing, for the other different types of designs or covers and so forth, was created from this horizontal loom. So you can see here that Menket tomb, the horizontal loom, which Menket is in the new kingdom. I think he's in the 12th dynasty, if I'm not mistaken. So you can see the sister here kneeling down in front of the loom here. You can see the spindles of this sister that have the spindle with the thread, which would be the flax seeds. Again, I talked about the flax seeds and how they harvest the flax seeds and then use the bottom of the flax seeds and cut them into strips and then splice them, entangle them together in order to create what we call yarn today. So here is the depiction here. The woman would take a collective strips of the fiber and begin to slice them down to the length in order to make them finer. Then they would splice them, and by rubbing them in a flat surface. In the model, those are the three women at the fair right with the back to the walls of the crouching on the floor. Here, depiction of here. The women would then twist and splice threads using spindles here. And in order to form balls or yarns of thread. So again, just talking about our ancestors took and what we call yarn today to create fiber. They used flax seeds in order to create fiber. They created the looms in order to weave. So they were the innovators
of weaving. So they created this technology called loom in order to weave. In order to weave, they created what we call yarn today from the flax seeds that they harvest in the springtime and pick in the summertime, slice thin, splice them together, entangle them to create what we call yarn and put them on a spindle and then onto the loom in order to create the fabric out of the flax seeds. The women then twisted the flax thread using spindles in order to form balls or yarns of threads in models. Those are three women standing in front of the previously mentioned women, Hotep Sinshan, Hotep Jehudi Asara, peace, Bunny. Okay. In models, those are three women standing in front of the previous mentioned women, and they are holding two spindles each. Next to you see a horizontal loom, which we see here, which I told you will see in the Old Kingdom and in the Middle Kingdom, and then in the New Kingdom, they created the vertical looms. Over them to weave. At a late period during the New Kingdom, vertical looms began to be used. Once the raw fabric was produced, garments could be fashioned out of them. As an entire process was very labor intense, most ancient Egyptians of the Remich or the Kemetu would sew loose robes and light garments with very little stitching and usually no frills. All right, so I talked about them taking the flax seeds and creating what they created. They started creating linen. They started creating linen out of the flax seeds. So I talked about them splicing it into thin layers and then slicing them into thin layers, splicing them, intertwining them together. So you can see here a picture. These are in the museums here in Egypt. And you can see that they kind of look like yarn, but these are the fiber from the flax seeds that I talked about and broke down earlier. And as they would intertwine them together, they would intertwine them in the balls, as I explained earlier on a previous slide. So flax/linen fibers was removed from the stem of the flax plant by stripping. Fibers obtained in these ways was in the form of flax strips, the length equivalent to the heights of the main stems of the plant. These were kept until needed in large groups, twisted into hanks, and with the splice and twist technique. The next stage after obtaining the fiber strips was the form that was termed a robe. First, the wider strips were split down lengthways according to the fineness of the yarn's desire. Then the strips was joined together by splicing, and a number of balls of splice rolls were also found in Lohan, which is in Kemet. UC 7509. I'm not going to go over the museum numbers, but Lohan, 4 twisted hanks of flax fibers, 13 to 15 centimeters long, probably late Middle Kingdom, about 1850 to 1750 BC. From Lohan, 2 balls splice roll, probably in the Middle Kingdom, above 1850 to 1750. Here is the spindle, the needle, and so forth. So these, I just wanted to show these because this is the technique. This is not the technique, but this is the technology that our ancestors created in order to create the technology of clothing. So here is the 2 wooden spindles, the wooden spindles, and the needle and so forth, the spindle here. So this is in the museum also in Kemet. All right. This is also from the tomb of Menket Ra. And this is what's the name? And look at the depictions also. Look at the depictions and see what color see what color they are majority wearing. And McCullough and some of the pictures I already showed with the paintings and the things on the wall, you're going to predominantly see them in white. They had other colors, but predominantly you're going to see in white. Most of the ancient Egyptians preferred their clothing to be white or whitish, and so dyeing fabric was not very common, though it existed. So I'm going to talk more in the presentation on part 2 about dyeing, which we're going to go into West Africa in part 2. Today we're just going to specifically deal with North Africa, because we have to understand, and I want to establish here the technology. where did this technology come from, and then it spread it all over. Because we know in the beginning of time, as one of the first slide that I gave, where I had a piece of Brother Uncle where he did a presentation where I had it repeating what he talked about in the beginning, how they was talking about the homos. So they was going into the homos on their what's the name? Homos is humans, for those that may not know what homo is. So he started going into the different stages of human. So he was stating that how we was naked, and then our ancestors created the technology called clothing. So clothing is a technology, but I also wanted to go back and show how these things came into existence, and what region or what evidence that I can find that connect these people with creating the loom, the spindle, the needles, and creating this such fiber that we call linen in order to create clothing, robes, and so forth. So I wanted to start in North Africa and then go into West Africa in part 2, because a lot of the clothing that we wear today is specifically coming from out of West Africa and so forth. And I know a lot of people talk about a lot of the material today that comes from out of Africa today. You have the Dutch companies in there that's creating the fabric and so forth, and we're not creating fiber anymore, which I'll touch a little bit on that tomorrow. With the Dutch and with the Portuguese coming in the 1500s, and the Dutch coming in during the 17th century. But the final products, as we see it on the linen, covers the mummies or the sheets found buried with the dead in the tombs, or even in the depiction of the painting, was truly remarkable. So fine, white linen, so light and airy that it sometimes transparent. Because we have to understand, them having white clothing or creating this linen, this white linen from the flax seeds, was it was lighter. And again, you can see that they was we know Africa, the sun is closer to the equator there, and we know that is a hot and tropical continent. So they had created this linen because the linen, they could get more air in, what I'm saying, they can be more cooler with this white linen. So you will see them depicted more in images in white, but you will see them in other different colors as well. But more of the depictions, you will see them with white clothing on. And that is the reason, because they choose the linen and the white, because it was cooler, because Africa was hot. Small amount of silks was traded in the Eastern Mediterranean, possible as early as the second half of the second millennium BCE, and trace of silk has been found in Egypt tombs. Animal skins, above all leopard skins, were sometimes worn by the priests, by the pharaohs in the roles. And those that are familiar, I'm talking about the Sim priests. The Sim priests will wear leopard skin. First servants of God, such outfits were found by Tutankhamun tomb and were depicted quite frequently on the wall tombs. And they found a lot of fabrics and materials in Tutankhamun tomb. At a time, the kings and queens were decorated ceremony clothing adorned with feathers. All right, here is a couple of other depictions. As again, I told you, most of the colors that you will see the remnants of the Kemetu wear were white. They did have some where it was not white, but specifically white. And they did show, which in part 2, I'm going to show how they created dye from the plants. So we'll get in part 2, I'll get into the dyeing process, because they use dye, but they didn't use dye all the time like West Africa used dye a lot in their material. So I'll get into that in part 2 tomorrow, which will be on my channel and not on Facebook. So I'll get into the dye, explain the dye, how they use the dye, and even show a video of the dye, even show some of the dye, show some of the places that they use to, well, I'm gonna say shops for better terminology, shops that they use in order to create dyes that was buried in the hole. But we'll get in that tomorrow. But these are just some of the other depictions. You can see a lot of the depictions are white. So they use white, and again, white was used because white was more, or they used linen that they created from the flax, because the linen cloth was lighter. It was lighter, and it was cooler for them to wear because, again, we know the sun is closer to that equator of Africa. Peace, Maisha, Hotep, Sheshmu, Patai, Amma. All right. Laundry. Now, we have been taught or been up under the misconceptions when we look at Africa. We say that Africa, our ancestors and those that are over there now, do not bathe, especially in ancient times. You know, we did not bathe and so forth. And cleanliness was next to godliness in Kemet. So that they even when they created this technology called clothing, they created this technology called looms, spindles, needles, linen, and so forth. They did bathe and they did clean the material that they had. So they did not walk around after they created this technology of clothing and different types of fiber that it was dirty. They wore linen garments, which they are special carefully to have always fresh washed. Cleanliness was apparently next to godliness in ancient Egypt or in Kemet or Timeri, if we're going to get by the names, and who was closer to the gods than the pharaohs themselves. Since earlier historic times, the titles of chief washers of the palace and washers of the pharaohs are known, and keeping a royal clothing lily white was the duty of the chief bleacher. So at those times, our ancestors did create something where they was able to keep the technology of clothing that they created clean. Manual washing clothing was hard work. Soap was unknown to the ancient Remech. Solal made a castor oil and saltpetre or some such of substance or detergent made of soapwork and asol were used. So they made this certain type of oil or detergent from these certain types of plants in order to clean themselves and also clean the technology of clothing that our ancestors made. The laundry was beaten, rinsed, and wrung by pairs of workers. By 1200 BCE, there were a fireproof boiler in the wash house, and the hot water lightened the workload. Many above, so you can see that our ancestors, damn, that's slick. Yeah, that is slick. So, you know, I'm glad, you know, so I'm always trying to point out things that our ancestors did so we can get out of the misconceptions that we didn't come from greatness. Africa sustains the whole world, but I know a lot of us is illiterate to things due to us being taught through school and indoctrinated and and certain religions and so forth. So we have a misconception of what our ancestors did. So without our ancestors creating clothing, in order for them to create clothing, they created the fiber from the flax plant, which we call yarn today. They created the loom in order to weave, created the invention of weaving by creating the loom, which is also a technology that was created in Africa. Many above all poor people who had access to faculties had to do their laundry under the time's difficult conditions, washing on the shores of the river of the banks of the canal, which had advantage on not having to carry a lot of water in heavy earth pots and could be dangerous. So the upper echelons, you know, they had things of what we call wash houses today. Man, I love our true history of ourselves. I do too, man. I love bringing out peace, Sahan Pickett. I hope I'm saying your name right, sister. So they created these what we call wash houses today, and they created these different detergents from different plants, the soapwort and the asphodel, if I'm pronouncing that right, to create these different detergents in order to clean the fiber and also clean themselves. And then later on, they began to use these fireproof boilers in their wash houses, hot water lighting to workload. Because again, when we wash clothes, we put the clothes on what? Well, we put the clothes on. when we washing our white clothing, what do we put the clothes on? We put them on hot water in order to get the clothing cleaner. And again, our ancestors, peace, Sister Marie, um, um, so in a lot of the depictions that I have shown on the walls and so forth they have been in white linen. We know white linen, white clothing was produced, even though they created dye in that region. They use white because Africa is a tropical continent. The sun is closer to the equator of that continent, so it is hot. So linen that they created this, so they use white because white was not as hot, and they can keep cool in the white. And again, the hot pots was used to boil to clean the white thoroughly. I talked about them also wearing leopard skin, and when you understand the Kemetu or the Remich culture, and we talk about the priest, we're talking about there's so many different branches of the priest, but we're talking about the Shem priest. So the Shem priest will wear leopard. So you can see here, this is a statue. I think this is in Hetka Bata, which is y'all may know as Memphis, Egypt. And this is in the temple of Ptah. And you can see here the statue here, and he has on a leopard skin robe. This is a Sem priest. We can see the nose busted off, and that's we know why the nose was busted off when Napoleon came into Egypt and so forth. And here is another depiction on the wall here. You can see, and again, the colors, our ancestors. And you can see the Shem priest here with the leopard skin on. You can see here in this depiction here, this brother has the Agdad symbol here. This is the Shem priest here. The Shem priest. And this is, I know a lot of y'all that do the Meta Nature know what this sign is. This symbol is. All right. Here is the tomb of Menket Ra in Thebes Waset. So here is the tomb here. And in the tomb, they found so many different things in his tomb. And again, I showed you the model of in Menket Ra temple. There was so many things that they took out of the temple. So, and he was showing the display of the weaving of the horizontal loom, the weavers inside, the women with the spindles and so forth in there. And this Menket Ra is in the 12th dynasty. The models like one shown on the right side of the slide may look like toys, or therefore appear to be doubtful historical value, but to the archaeologist who has little written data on the daily life of the Egyptian or the Remich of the Kemetu of 2000 BC, such models give much information about contemporary activity. Little wooden models of the dead man servants at their work provides for his welfare and manning his boats, constitute a part in the tomb's equipment of every well-to-do Remich of Kemetu in the Middle Kingdom, 2160 to 788 BC. He believed the life after death would in all respect to be a continuation of the one on earth, and a fact that depends on these models for making the possible accounts for their being accurate. So anybody that deals with the opening of the mouth ceremony with the Shem, that's right, the opening of the mouth ceremony. The Adeg symbol that I showed, peace, Josh. Fascinating how they keep clothing white. How did they clean bodily stains to keep clothing white? Did they use the cloth with the medical bandage? Yes, they used from the material. They made cloths and so forth. The linen cloths, which we have in our house, the linen tablecloths, the linen wear, the linen pants and so forth that we wear today. Yes, they made those to clean, that they extracted from those different plants. They use oils to create this different type of detergent to clean the clothes and to clean them, to clean themselves in it. Lisa. Also, if you understand the Remich culture, not even just the Remich culture, if you understand African culture, if you understand our culture, you understand that we understand energy. And when we talk about the Ka, the Ka and the Ba, when we talk about energy, we talk about the Ashe, you know, if we talk about the Rika, we're talking about the spirit, we're talking about energy. So our ancestors understood energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred from one state to the next. So they understood that we could not die, because they understood our spirit could not die. So he created these different models and stashed them in the temples. And you can see this all throughout the culture in Kemet. You can see this all throughout African culture. They was buried with so many different things because they wanted to take these things into the afterlife or into the ancestral realm. So they were buried with these things. So Menket Ra, which his temple is in Waset. You can go check it out and verify it for yourself. And these are the things that they found, all these things that they found in his temple, the archaeologists that excavated the land and Thebes, which is Waset. And so he created these models of boats because he wanted to take the boats into the ancestral realm. He created a model of the weavers and the looms weaving because he wanted clothing in the ancestral realm. He wanted the boat in order to travel in the ancestral realm, and so many other different things that they found in his tube that he used. He wanted to take in his afterlife, so it can be his afterlife can be a continuation of this realm that he was in the physical realm that he was in. He believed that life after death would, in all respect, be a continuation of the one on earth, and the fact that he depended on these models for making the possible accounts for their being accurate. Representations of the daily activities contribute to his welfare. One of the important household pursuits represents in the manner is weaving of the clothes for his garments. So this was an important thing for him to have in there because, again, he wanted those garments to go with him into the ancestral realm, into the Agungun. All right. Here is another depiction. This is a girl dressed in sheer linen. This is off the wall tombs of Zarasa Ka Ra, approximately around 420. So a lot of the pictures that I'm showing, I'm actually showing the depictions of things that are actually on the wall in North Africa now, and things or models that are in Africa now that's in the Cairo Museum now. So this is a woman here in linen, and again, it is in white. And again, we know white is to keep them cool. You know what I'm saying? It's a cool color to keep them cool because we know Africa is a hot and tropical continent. The fame of the fine linen of ancient Egypt was deserved, and Egypt, or Kemet, may justly be called the cradle, if not the birthplace of linen. In their inscriptions, the Egyptians of the Remich of the Kemetu prided themselves on their skills in raising flax and weaving it into clothing. So reiterating again, they used the fiber to make the linen clothing from the flax seeds that I showed on a previous slide of what flax is, and they planted flax in the springtime. And then they picked it in the summertime, scripted into different scripts, spliced it and entangled it together to create what we call yarn today. Then created the vertical, the horizontal loom, and then started to weave this fabric that they created from the flax plant to create this linen clothing for us to have on. Some of the walls paintings that decorate their tombs show us delightful, graceful girls' attires in the sheer of white linen dress through which the flesh tones, gleams, and trick understood painters even in that earlier day. They have also many specimens of linen which prove that from earlier pre-dynastic times before 4000 BC through the whole Kemetu history, weaving was one of the more accomplished arts. The linen they produced could be exceedingly delicate by 3000 BCE Egyptian or the Remish weavers were capable of weaving the finest of cloth with 64 warps threads and 48 webs threads per centimeter. About the 6th dynasty, approximately 2100 BCE, cloth, it was said, it was so fine it could be pulled through the Sinic ring. A similar claim was made by Pliny concerning the first millennium linen. During the 11th dynasty, while the cloth measurement 160 to 180 centimeters, linen was a fabric of choice for living. The dead were also buried in it, and the mummifiers, after removing the inner organs in the dehydrations of the corpse with helps of salt and natron. So we knew the ancestors piece, Christopher, also created what we call mortician science. When we know, so our ancestors created this science as well, mortician science, preserving the bodies. You know, this is where mortician science comes from. So they did certain things. They took out certain organs, such as the brain. They took out the stomach. They took out the liver. They took out the intestines. But they left the heart. And the heart was considered in Kemet the ib. The ib was considered the consciousness, considered the mind. Dehydrating the corpse with the help of salt and natron, anointed with oils, with fine wraps it up upon narrow strips of linen. So that linen that they used to wrap the bodies up, what we call the sahu, or what y'all would call mummy wraps. This was linen that they was used to wrap the bodies up. So even the dead bodies was wrapped up in this technology called clothing. Arm, legs, even fingers was wrapped separately. This swabble afforded them the protection of the goddess Tat. Linen was also part of the funeral offerings, often symbolic when written promise of offerings of word. All right. Here is another depiction here, and I forgot what wall this is on, but you can see the ancestors harvesting the flax plants. You can see them beating the linen, which I'll go into more specifically in part 2 tomorrow. The beating of the linen and so forth with these tools that they use. You can see the harvesting, the picking of the flax here. You can see the sisters here in the loom here, and which would be a horizontal loom, and I explain why it looks vertical, even though I explained that they created the vertical loom in the old dynasty, and it went from the old dynasty and the middle dynasty, and then in the new dynasty they created the vertical loom, which I showed you a reduplication. I wasn't able to show you that, and then I showed you how the weavers are still using the horizontal loom and the vertical loom. I showed you a depiction of that, how it looks today. It still looks almost similar to the ancestors creating the loom or this technology thousands of years ago. The ancestors talked and wrote about linen fabrics and linen items, bed linen, which we all have, linen tablecloths, which a lot of us still have or had in the past, and linen of clothes come from very early days of humanity. So our ancestors were the inventors of this fabric called linen, which was created from the flax seed. So I try to show much documentations or imagery that was on the wall in North Africa. So I wanted to show this presentation before I showed the part 2 when I'm dealing with West Africa, where I go more in the showing of the fabrics, more into the dyeing process, more into the designs and why they designed it in this certain particular way, and so forth. But I wanted to show the technology. Where did the technology come from? So I had to show the loom. I had to show the spindles. I had to show the needles. I had to show where yarn comes from, or the invention of yarn from the flaxseed, where the clothing or the material of the fabric comes from. So these are my references here. I hope this presentation was very educational for those that may have missed the presentation. You can go back and look at it. It'll also be downloaded to my YouTube channel, Kofi Paisa TV, tomorrow. but I had to do this presentation to set up the presentation for part 2, which will be, I won't do on Facebook. It'll be on my YouTube channel, Kofi Paisai TV. So if you hadn't subscribed to Kofi Paisai TV, please subscribe to Kofi Paisai TV. I'm going to go on about 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, to do part 2, which will be in West Africa. This was dealing with the Pacific region of North Africa and the technology that created the technology of clothing. So we have to be very grateful for our ancestors. Our ancestors were very innovative. And I know we have been taught that our ancestors did nothing. They did nothing for society, because this is what the food system or the school system teaches us. So I wanted to jump into this, and then y'all be able to walk with me when I get into part 2 tomorrow. These are all my references here. There were plenty of references. I didn't use one source. I utilized many sources as possible as I can. I had a few other ones I could have used, but I didn't get through doing what I needed to do to extrapolate the data and do some other thorough research on them before I actually use those sources. But these are my sources here. And again, please go subscribe to Kofi Paisai TV, the channel that takes the black woman, the black man, and black child Eurocentric mind and Africanize it. I hope, again, that y'all learned from this presentation. It took me some time to actually do both of the presentations. I hope I didn't let no one down, for doing the presentations. Peace, Tawanda. Appreciate that, Senate Lisa, for putting the link in the bottom. For those that may not be, that may not know they may not be familiar with my channel, she got the link at the bottom right there. Click the link, go subscribe, hit the bell, so when I go live tomorrow, you will already be hit the bell. I go live, it'll notify you. That's what the bell for. It'll notify you that I'm going live, but I'll share it tomorrow. Again, I appreciate it. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. And Shem Imhotep. Shem Imhotep means to depart in peace.
Man in the full knowledge of himself is a superb and when man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment, and captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own ends. Man should understand himself because man is full of knowledge, and this knowledge is a gift of nature. When Mother Nature created man, she deprived him of nothing. He was given the faculty of understanding all things around him. This faculty for understanding has not been taken away from him. None of his senses have been taken away from him. So there is no excuse for the black man.
Raising my team, red, black, and green, queens and kings, salute, now scream, I shake, spring from below the head, I shake, vibe for a different victory. I'm raising my team, red, black, and green, queens and kings, salute, now scream, I shake, spring from below the head, I shake, vibe for a different victory.